This is the world's most passionate fan base, and it's not going anywhere. There's 50 million youth sports parents out there. I would rather go watch my little guy's game than a Cubs game. And to be able to pinpoint passion is something that no other vertical can do.
All right, we are back for another episode of Under the Number. Today, I'm joined by Cameron Korab, the founder of Youth Sports Business Report and the co-founder of PlayUp Partners. Cameron, thanks so much for hopping on today.
What's going on, Brent? Excited to be here. Congrats on all the success thus far. Your stuff's blowing up, so couldn't be more excited.
That's incredibly nice of you to say, and I really appreciate that coming from you, given what you've put together here. And we're going to do the whole rundown of what you've built.
Yeah.
Just from a big picture perspective, why is youth sports popping right now? Why is there so much capital? Why are people backing up the truck into youth sports all of a sudden? Why now?
Yeah, it's the $56 billion question, or 54 or 40 billion, wherever you get your numbers from. It really stems down to, for me and the businesses that I'm most intrigued in, is because this is the world's most passionate fan base, and it's not going anywhere, right? There's 50 million youth sports parents out there domestically in the United States. And what we say is, I'm here in Chicago, I'm a big Cubs fan. I would rather go watch my little guy's game than a Cubs game, right? Like I just know that is insanely hard to replicate. And to be able to pinpoint passion is something that no other vertical can do. And I would pair that with, in the pro and college market, especially, sports is the last thing people are going to watch live, and everything is infused in it, from technology to media to content to partnerships. Right? There's those two things alone, I think, kind of put sports and youth sports specifically on another playing field in this whole wonderful ecosystem of sport.
Is part of the surge here that there's a fragmentation between the casuals and the people who are very, very serious about their sport, where obviously there are super high-end academies and personal trainers, and you can go nuts if you want your kid to be the next name the stud from that sport?
Yeah.
Is that a massive tailwind here? Are there other like structural changes that are making this such an attractive space all of a sudden?
We break it up into three sections, right? You have your rec league, which has probably the most, but it's the least sexy, and it's not expensive, but it's definitely like fading, right? Then you have your school and scholastic, which obviously we all played. This is kind of that middle tier. It depending on where you play, it costs money or doesn't cost money, but every high school has a football team and a basketball team. And then, depending on where you go to school, baseball team, maybe, just depends. And then you have your club travel, right? Which is probably where the most attention of dollars are coming. And to your point, there's so much fragmentation because there's no governing bodies, right? I just did a post today that the Little League World Series was hiring some folks. And when people think youth sports, there's no NFL shield, right? There's no PAs. There's state governing bodies and things like that, but there's nothing nationally. And the closest thing is probably Little League. So just to think about that super macro is this is the Wild West to the umpteenth percent. And every day in my shoes, I'm learning something new and learning about a new entity or a new organization in one of those probably three categories. And what really makes it difficult is the seasonality and different orgs that can play across all three of those, right? So we think that there's huge opportunity, and people are obviously starting to see that. But I think it's a little bit deeper than, you see PE and you hear roll up, right? Like, it's deeper than that. And I think it really comes down to the people in place at these entities, right? A lot of them are started as mom and pop shops, where the operator themselves played a sport, coached a sport, and then decided to start a business in the sport, and they know nothing else, right? Not to their own demise. Like, that's what they know. They know how to run an event. They know how to get people and run a quality event. They don't know how to do a finance report or a marketing 360 marketing platform, right? If you say those things to them, their head might explode. So I think that's from a services, PE side, what really is intriguing, but easier said than done.
Taking a step back, how did the Youth Sports Business Report come to be? You've built quite the
Yeah.
following built on
Yeah.
Substack. You also have your website and great LinkedIn presence, and you've done the media piece really, really well. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Appreciate it. I, in the lovely world of going to business school and is it worth it or not worth it? I had an entrepreneurial class, and one of the main takeaways was solve for that pain point. And every day I had moved from my big pro college agency sports marketing job over to a smaller operator in the youth sports basketball space, and I was having extreme problems trying to find just any uh, business acumen about the youth sports space in terms of deal flow, in terms of sponsorship, in terms of technology, all of that. And I was like, well, I have it kind of pieced together on my back end of how I'm, getting the information, but like no one else is seeing this right in one place. So yeah, at its core, I really just wanted to solve a problem, and being able to put a nice clean brand over it. Obviously, with aggregated and original content and now data partners and now sponsor partners, the newsletter all the way to the website to, the partnerships that we're doing on the content end and more to come, right? There's a whole ecosystem that I never thought would blow up this quickly. And now you see other kind of entities joining in, and it's honestly, it's great. Like it's all to make youth sports better. And I think the more attention we put on it, is amazing. And I will say I always try to keep it super positive because I'd say 99% of what's coming out is negative on all the bigger platforms. So let's try to find the positive, because and you can attest to it. Like sports are what shape a lot of people. And to be honest, like there's enough negativity in the world right now. Like we need a beacon for hope, and I think sports can do that.
Amen. Well, talk a little bit about the value chain of youth sports, because I think a lot of times you hear about, like you mentioned, the roll ups, and
Mhm.
people do have the tendency to kind of cringe when they hear private equity dollars
Yeah,
going into
no
something as
doubt.
pure as youth sports. And there are certainly bad actors involved in some cases, but there's
Yep.
also, I think, a ton of opportunity to make the experience way better
Mhm.
and to let capitalism actually do its thing and democratize youth sports for a lot more
Yep.
people, which is a longer term hope here. But on the roll up front,
Mhm.
what I hear and read about most are people buying
Mhm.
facilities, leagues,
Yep.
camps, but there's a
Yep.
lot more than that. I mean, there's a media component,
Yep.
compliance, all these things. Give us the flyover there.
Yeah, I think what's most important when people kind of are piecing together those verticals, right? And you kind of hit on it. You could go buy an operator, and there's plenty of operators out there that are kind of doing it internally under their own brand of buying and piecing together a basketball entity and a football entity and a baseball and volleyball, right? And honestly, like they've struggled, right? Like the first wave of PE kind of came in probably like 10, 15 years ago. And you saw like, some of the major tech brands now in this space are doing it well, but on the operator and facility side, they're kind of struggling, which is always interesting to see. And I think it's because they bit off a little bit more that they can chew. Uh, but honestly, and I talk about this with some confidants in the space. It comes down to the people that are in this world, in this very niche youth sports world. And what I'm starting to see, and I think is a very big tailwind, is you're starting to see like really interesting backgrounds of people coming into this space, right? You're starting to see people that have worked at ESPN for the last 15 years now diving into this space. You're starting to see people that came from the private equity side of the business, starting to run a lot of the finances in certain companies, right? You're starting to see facility operators from the pro and college level get down to a grassroots level, which I think is the biggest like eye opener of where the space is going. I had once again someone that worked with me on the agency side on Gatorade, right? Then they moved to Overtime, which is obviously a big
Yeah.
powerhouse, and then now they're working for Game Changer, right? Like that doesn't happen by happenstance. They're looking for the best people because the opportunity is there, and it's kind of a two-way street. people say follow the money. Yeah, we're following the money. The PE is there. I'm saying follow the people. like like look at all these people. I know you have a segment on it. I'm trying to bolster that side up as well. Like that's the biggest kind of indicator of where the space is going, and who's really investing into it seriously, and who's kind of keeping maybe at arm's length.
Follow the talent. Absolutely. That's why we do the people moves thing.
Yeah.
It's such a strong indicator. Seriously. What is a deal as you've really become an authority in this space? I've started paying attention to this youth, the capital flowing into the youth market,
Mhm.
probably for the better part of a year. So not very long. But as I started to dig in, you realize, wow, there's been a ton of activity. What, if you had to pick, is one deal that stood out to you the most over the past 12 to 18 months where you thought, wow, there is another piece of confirmation of how real of
Yeah.
a market this is?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite operators in the space is Prep Network. They have they started as a scouting platform, moved into an events platform, now a full-fledged events and media platform. Right, Maple Capital saw a lot of upside to their business, right, and I think it's public. $30 million, and now they just announced their first acquisition of a smaller basketball operator. Um, but that to me, in this second, I'm going to keep referring to it as a second round of private equity into this space, was just like, oh man, like this is serious, and you got to find once again the right people to do it, because not only do they have the events and operator side down to a science, they also have this media entity that is unlike anything I've ever seen in the space. And obviously, there's a ton of upside to both of those. And if you can keep adding on strategically partners into that space, whether it be different sport or another media outlet, that rolls up really quickly and is something that kind of is a flywheel in itself. And then you can add in merch and camps and all that good stuff into there. And it just kind of keeps going around and around. And you're not disrupting anything because they've done such a good job and they have such a strong brand, and they're trusted in the space, right? So to me, that's one that I, I paid close attention to, and um, is something that I think you'll start to see a little bit more of if the signals are right. But it's once again comes down to the people, and to know that you're going to get a workhorse on the back end that's going to go the extra mile for all that stuff is super important.
Yeah, that Maple Park is on one of their Dallas office is on Maple Avenue, about 4 minutes from where I'm standing right now. It's interesting you mentioned the what you've categorized as like the second wave of movers in the private equity and youth sports world. It's funny, it's like my old boss used to always say this, where it's like being too early is just the same thing as being wrong. So I do wonder, does this feel like kind of a sweet spot moment in time where you think there actually will probably be a lot of winners, where like this vintage is gonna probably outperform because things are just aligning and people have a better grip on the space?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, I think there's just more opportunity, especially in the tech and media space, which sports, it tends to be a laggard, and youth sports is definitely a laggard. Uh, where the operations, sorry, the facilities and operators themselves, that's a heavy capital lift into the multi millions of dollars to kind of roll some of those up. Whereas, you're starting to see AI platforms take shape here very quickly, and payment processing companies just based on technology, right? I'm a firm believer that U Sports all comes down to payment processing. You can take that one to the bank, no pun intended. Like any company you dig into, like who is their payment processor, and what are like that's how they're making money at the end of the day. You see a lot of freemium models and ad supported models, but at the end of the day, they're all payment processors. But to that end, right, it's all coming down to being able to identify a problem, right? Like in this grandiose vision of mine, right? And you could look back at any of the panels I've been on or anything. It all comes down to how do you alleviate a lot of the problems for the parents, the coaches at the end of the day, because they're the ones who are footing the bill and footing the time. And if there's a way to kind of have this one app to rule them all, where everything kind of fits under and consolidation, like that's always going to be key. But there are in that first wave, there, a lot of these main key stakeholders are walled gardens, and they're not going to share data. You might be a parent, and you might be on every single one of those apps between your couple of kids that play a couple of sports, but they're not talking to each other, right? And they want to keep you in their ecosystem for as long as possible. But that makes sense. It's business at the end of the day. But I think there are services, that are coming out that help kind of consolidate it a little bit. But on the B2B end, right, there's technology that's coming into space every day that is alleviating a lot of the outdated technology that some of these operators were really reliant on, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, there's an insane amount of friction, I'm sure, still today, as someone who has not been in that world for a decade. But when I think back to the number of camps and combines and Pop Warner days and things that I was participating in, so much of what I remember are folding tables with legal pads and lines and registration documents and weigh-ins and all these things that were just like, man, that is a ton of friction around every single event. The parents hate it, the people working the registration desk hates it, the athlete hates it.
Yeah, no, it's insane. Yeah, there was a post I made, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago of, is this like the gold standard of, from registration, right? Sorry, a unique identifier, right? Whoever owns that, in my opinion, that could be on the state or government level, maybe even. Think about it as a social security number for you as an athlete, right? That follows you throughout your journey. Could it be an insurance provider that has that, right? And that follows you from registration, team registration, on-site registration, checking into the game, all the way to these lovely new AI cameras that are tracking everything during the game. And it spits out, highlights for you at the end, and a recommendation to your coach and to you about how you can get better, right? And then it's a stat platform for if you're serious and getting recruited, right? Like that to me is a kind of an end game as well. And there's different companies that are working on different pieces of that. Um, and it's really, really fascinating to see, similar to what you're seeing with Anthropic and, AI and chat and all that good stuff. Like it's a race to see who can do it the fastest, which is fascinating to see from a top down level. I'm not, I don't have a horse in the race on any of those.
So we've talked a lot about private equity so far and a lot of the businesses that are being brought into those portfolios and the possibility of consolidation down the road. But there are also some really big strategic acquisitions that have taken place where companies like Huddle, for example, have made a lot of acquisitions and have brought a lot of brands under their umbrella. What do you make of some of these strategic players, strategic acquisitions, and what that means for a brand like Take a Huddle that's been around since 2006? Like, what's your perception of all that?
Yeah, I think what you're starting to see and have seen is the old adage of, if you can't beat them, join them. But it takes a way deeper meaning here, where some of these big providers are definitely trying to be a one-stop shop for all things in whatever, whether that be high school sports, which Huddle is obviously super strong in. You have Play On, right, that has three major brands underneath its wing of GoFan and NFHS and Max Preps, right? You're starting to see, probably under five brands kind of emerge, as one's true one-stop shops, right? And they all, in most cases, most of those were part of that first wave that have a decent backing, or they have a large, corporate backing of some sort.
Yeah.
Um, because, and this kind of leads back to your original question, there is so much to service in this, and in this vertical, from whoever the athlete is. It depends on what stage athlete they are, and that obviously reflects into the parents and the coaches and the fans, right? Where these entities are just piecing off and trying to pluck, and trying to acquire certain avenues that they might not be as strong in, but this partner is way stronger, so they're acquiring them, or just straight up acquiring them, which I think is probably the way of the future, and will continue to happen probably at a pretty accelerated pace until there's only like two or three of them. Uh, but like, you see them every day. Like Dick's Sporting Goods, obviously a major backer of Game Changer, right? Like that's a huge one that will probably not get sold, right? Until Dick's Sporting Goods, decides. So it's always interesting to see what lanes they're playing in. I made a chart probably maybe like 6 or 8 months ago. I think it's in like an original report that I did where you can see the probably 10 to 8 players and like what services they're providing, and then a checker, an X where those are fulfilled, and there's it's a smattering of what's what and who's who of services that they're providing. But a lot of those are Frankenstein companies that, picked up, different services along the way instead of building it internally. And,
Hmm.
it comes down to, is this going to, what investment is this going to cost me to build it internally and keep up with it versus hiring an expert who this was their business. This is their baby. They know everything about this space. Let's go make have a conversation with them and, hopefully bring them on board.
I'm also curious about professional leagues and how they are interacting with the youth world. I know, like, take the PLL, for example, Premier Lacrosse League. They have a whole youth academy thing, PLL juniors. Like, that seems really smart to have that kind of integration.
Yep.
Um, I know that like European soccer clubs have a much better and differentiated model, right,
Yeah.
for that. How do you see that landscape? Do you think that the NFL and the NBA and the WNBA, like, they're going to make more concerted efforts to get involved there, or is that more of a, maybe a one-off with my PLL example?
No, that they 100% should, because it 1,000,000% feeds into their flywheel of fandom, right? I'll give you a perfect example. I was in Utah for NBA All Star. Um, the Jazz, we met with one of their community members and I think their CCO at the time. And the way that they were describing their youth programs and their junior NBA program, which they operate and own internally.
Meaning as a team, not at a league level.
Yeah, well, I'll get into like RCX Sports, right? They own and operate a lot of NFL flag. They own and operate. Sorry, they don't own. They operate. NBA, junior NBA, and MLS. Like MLS's and NHL does a street hockey league, right? So the leagues, kind of lend their IP, and RCX runs franchise model of getting operators to own and operate their own leagues, which have the IP of the national leagues, right?
Got it.
What makes Utah, I think, a shining example is they go above and beyond that, right? They just don't want their IP to be out there. They want to get into the community because guess what? Those community members are going to be fans for the rest of their life, and whatever money you're spending on them now, it's an investment, right? You're gonna 100x that investment because they're going
Totally.
to be season ticket holders. They're going to buy merch. They're going to have their kids sign up, right? And it's an endless cycle. And even the sponsorship elements that are coming from the millions of kids that are playing in your junior leagues, that can be 6 to 7 figures of revenue just on the sponsorship level. And then it's kind of like it's the cost to operate it is written off by the sponsorship, and now it's just a pure marketing vehicle for your entity, which I don't think has super clicked yet. I hope it has for a lot of these other teams. But man, there's such an opportunity for that. But it takes a lot of work, and it's a full business inside of a business. But at the end of the day, these are your future fans, right? I want my little guy to be a Cubs and Bulls and Bears fan, right? So I would love for him to play in any of those entities. Uh, Outside of he's always going to be a Cubs and Bears Bulls fan, but like that's a great way to get his fandom even from level 50 to level 75, right?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, yeah, there's a lot that can be done there, and people I know are working on it. So yeah, it's exciting for sure.
Can you say a bit more about this sponsorship idea? In preparing for this, I heard you say something else recently where you were talking about corporate partnerships and commercial sponsorships
Mm-hmm.
that can be super strategic for the corporate entity itself, whether it's an apparel company or a
Mm-hmm.
hydration company or whatever it is. And
Yeah,
the like I kind of mentioned at the top, letting capitalism do its thing,
yeah.
how it can actually end up subsidizing the costs associated with youth sports, allowing many more people to participate.
That's the core root of Plant Partners, our agency side of our agency company, right? It is we want brands, mostly non-endemic brands, because endemic brands like a Gatorade, Nike, they've been, this is how sports marketing started, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, how many years ago, right? They know this, but non-endemic brands are newish to even the sports space, right? The college and pro space is super expensive, and it will only get more expensive. But the youth sports space, right, has so many, it has those elements of sponsorship to it, maybe not at a one game level. And this is a really big differentiator where youth sports isn't the Super Bowl, right? One game isn't getting 100 million people to watch. There's 100 million games going on that maybe 10 people are watching. So the scale is beyond, right? Uh, but at Play Up Partners and just the whole thesis around how corporate partners can get involved, we'd like to deem it into two buckets, right? You have to be addressing a youth sports issue, whether that's cost or equity access, right? There's a laundry list of those. And then you have to be positively impacting the parent, the kid, the coach, right, or all of them, right? So if we put a lens on the brands that we want to work with, and they check off those two buckets, right? That's the layer that's way deeper than any pro or college sponsorship can get you, because you're actually affecting the communities and the people that are actually using your brand, right? I used to work in the media world on the college and pro level, right? An NFL commercial any Sunday could run you, almost $250,000, right? That money could go crazy deep in a youth sports in the youth sports world. And guess what? You're actually affecting the people that are purchasing your product. And guess what? There's a layer even deeper where, yeah, you're not advertising directly to an 8-year-old, right? But they're hopefully going to remember that experience and what you provided them, and maybe it unlocks something for them or their family. And if you do that over time and it's a true partnership, that can go a long way. And when I say that, right, it's registration costs, right? Like a brand can step in and underwrite the registration to an event, right? They can underwrite the cost of getting highlights back to a player, right? Right now, highlights are paid to play in most cases, and a lot of the either more affluent people are getting them, or it's only the top 1% are getting them, right? There's a huge avenue to get those highlights underwritten by a brand, and guess what? That's media for the brand at the end of the day too. So I that's a part of the strategy and thinking that we do on the Play Up partner side. And there's an absolute unlock there that can underwrite, in some cases, the whole cost argument of youth sports in a nutshell.
Sometimes I wonder if my media diet and my algorithm, which is so sports heavy and sports business heavy now, makes me have a uh, perception problem. And this is a question that kind of comes from that. With how much I see and what gets served to me as far as activity in the youth sports space and NIL and college and pro sports franchise sales and all these things, like this is what I consume all day long. It makes it seem like this world is going absolutely bonkers. However, I don't think it's quite to the point of, if you're an HVAC guy right now or an electrician and you have a decent business, you are getting calls from private equity 5 times a week. I don't think that youth sports has reached that point, which again, for the people who have decided that's part of their thesis, I'm sure that they're getting some of the first bites at the apple, at least within this second go round, like you said, within this time frame. Um, how real or how much activity really is going on, do you think?
I think there's more than you think. But at the end of the day, like, you have to be, you have to have some cachet to you, right? You have to
Yeah.
have, I've heard of operators and companies that have sold after like 6 months, even, right? Like,
Wow. Like
just
flipped. Absolutely
flipped
flipped.
flipped because they have a sound business model. They have the upside of the marketplace on their side, and these private equity institutional capital are looking to cash in on this wave. And to be honest, it's such the wild west that I don't know if private equity is overvaluing or the entity themselves are undervaluing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've heard crazy valuations, and I've been on the side of evaluating, uh, on the consulting side, and it's pretty remarkable to see like the differentiation, and a lot of it, right, is probably going under the radar and not being publicized because of, hey, my operator just raised $30 million, and my my registration fee is up 20% year over year. That doesn't make sense to me, right? So people are definitely cognizant of that in this marketplace for sure.
Okay, well, kind of in closing here, you talked about you trying to make this your youth sports business report a very positive place. There's enough negativity coming from other commentators and people in this realm. Give us a closing thought on like the white pill of the future of youth sports. Where is the what's the glass half full? What are the things that you're genuinely excited about and where you think that there's massive upside and potential that can benefit all these stakeholders we've been talking about, from the athletes to the parents to the coaches?
I think to kind of sum up everything we've kind of chatted about and kind of pull the thread through, right? I obviously am super bullish on the brand's play in this whole youth sports space, and I think, or else I wouldn't have created a company to kind of help in that regard, right? You'll start to see a resurgence of community, or just more pushes into community, and the resurgence of rec play. I think is the lowest hanging fruit for these brands to kind of get involved in, and they want to spend money to do that, but they need to be able to meet their KPIs and have that community lens on it. But to pull from those actual media dollars and those sponsorship dollars that I've seen, right? Those are big budgets and can make a lot of good in this youth sports microcosm. And then kind of the three other pillars, right? You have your tech that we've hit on, the pro angle, right? And then if you can get a handful of those larger entities now to kind of play nice-ish in the sandbox, to make parents and coaches and athletes' life a little bit easier. I think that's what gets me up in the morning. That gets me super excited because I personally, I've only been in it, 4 or 5 years now. Like I've never seen more collaboration and more hands-on and more people talking to each other in a vertical like youth sports, and it's really exciting to see. And maybe we started some of that with YSBR, and that's just amazing, right? There's a whole community that's growing out of this, and more creators and more ideas. And at the end of the day, if you look on my LinkedIn, my mission is to make youth sports better, because just like you, like without sports, I'm probably not in this position I am. You maybe as well. So I know the positivity it can have, and at the end of the day, like that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, I think it's safe to say YSBR has definitely had a hand in all that. Time for a quick plug.
Yeah,
Who
let's do
should
it.
subscribe to Youth Sports Business Report, and who should
Yeah,
reach out to Play Up Partners?
yeah, thank you. Any brands looking to make a difference and get into the esports space, right? That is what we're doing on the Play Up Partners. We are connecting. We are the bridge to the world's most passionate fan base. And you might see it as scary, but we have strategies, we have tech in place and tools that have decentralized and defragmentized this whole industry, and it helps you kind of go in at one avenue, and kind of be able to encircle the whole market. So that's on the Play Up Partner side. Sports business side, right? Subscribe. Even if you don't have or are involved in the U sports space, you probably know someone that is, and I guarantee you'll learn something new every single day. I know I do, and it's fascinating stuff that is affecting every single athlete under the sun right now, in the States. We're pretty geared on the States, but growing into Europe and the Asia markets and Africa and Canada and Mexico. And it's everything from investments to facilities to sponsorship, to NIL, right? It's stuff where this is the new frontier, and right, it's been here for all this time, and people are starting to finally, it's starting to finally unlock to them. So if you're just curious about this industry as a whole, I highly suggest you follow along. Everything on our channels are free, so and there's a lot more to come. So we're really excited.
All right, Cameron, I love it. We'll have to do this again for sure
Yeah,
at some point down the
100%,
road. But thanks
100%.
so much for coming on. This is awesome.
Yeah, Brent, I appreciate you. Best of luck, and yeah, looking forward to reconnecting here.
Absolutely. Thanks.